Welcome to Messy-nism, the Jewish view of Moshiach, Episode 8. This week comes with a warning. Some of the material discussed is controversial, and listeners may be uncomfortable. I believe that the substance of what is covered is accurate and important. If you continue to listen, please do so with an open mind, and feel free to reach out to me if you would like to discuss further on Twitter at Isaacson, Isaacson. This week we summarize the story of Shabbetai Tsvi before delving into some of the mainstream rabbinic texts which were contorted to support the claims of the movement. We then discuss the aftermath of Shabbetai Tsvi and his movement, including Jacob Frank and the heresy hunting of Rav Yaakov Emden and Rav Moshe Hagiz, as well as the controversies surrounding Rav Yonatan Eibshitz and Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzato, respectively. Finally, we touch on the as of yet not well understood connections between the Sabbatean debacle and the rise of the Chassidic movement. Thank you for joining us. Greater than zero. Okay. So we are talking about Shabbetai Tsvi. I'm going to do a quick recap, and then we will talk about post-Sabbateanism, which is Rabbi Noor's book over there. So Shabbetai Tsvi, let's see. We covered the what was happening historically that led to Shabbetai Tsvi showing up. So Xeris Tachvatat and the spread of Kabbalah, the printing press, and crypto Marano Jews who needed to feel some sort of catharsis for what they've been, the life they've been leading as, sort of a dual life. We talked about the biography of Shabbetai Tsvi in terms of being probably bipolar, wandering from one town to the next, doing these weird things, like marrying a Sefer Torah. What else? Then he goes to Nathan of Gaza, who tells him, you are in fact Moshiach, like you suspected, and that just opens the floodgates to saying the Shem HaMeforash, saying God's name, pronouncing God's name as it's written, all kinds of other things, breaking down of sexual mores, eating the Korban Pesach with the chayil, with the forbidden fat. Nathan of Gaza is his philosopher. He's his Paul, essentially. He's giving Kabbalistic explanations to all the weird stuff that he does. He's the one telling everyone that Shabbetai Tsvi was in fact anointed so that he can be Moshiach. And then we talked about how basically a significant number, if not the majority of Jews, really worldwide believed that Shabbetai Tsvi was Moshiach.
Eastern Europe.
It spread down to Yemen. It spread across.
It spread, but the majority of the people, my you know better than I do, but my understanding is that the majority of the following was in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Where he was.
Right.
And the other, while throughout the rest of the world, there was a smattering of followings, absolutely, but nothing to the extent of what it was in Eastern Europe.
So I definitely agree with you. I think it was stronger in Eastern Europe and in his enclave, meaning in Turkey, in the Middle East, in Eretz Yisrael, certainly. Welcome, right on time. Just doing the catch-up. Bohemia, Germany, but it reached far and wide.
It reached, but I don't think the majority of people accepted it far and wide.
So
they heard about it.
Yeah, they definitely heard about it. My understanding is that there is really like a machlokas historians at this point as to was it the majority of the Jewish world or not, how much people accepted, didn't accept, but it's clear that people sold their belongings, heard about it,
yes.
but took proactive steps. They tried to move en masse either to Eretz Yisrael or to Turkey. They sold their belongings. They cashed in their debts.
From Eastern Europe.
From Eastern Europe and beyond. They're like Jews in Yemen are talking about the Mashiach is here and
right, but for the most part, my limited information is that some might have clearly
not as
they did not really act upon it. They heard about it.
Okay, fair.
Okay. Also, my understanding is also in France,
they
heard about it. They but they didn't act upon it.
Okay, fair enough. the other thing we talked about is this idea of the psychology that sort of undergirds everything that's happening. Is this idea of groupthink, mass hysteria, that you've been waiting your whole life for Moshiach to come, and suddenly people in shul the Rav of the shul is telling you Moshiach is here, and the guy comes from one town over to tell you that the doctor that you've seen a bunch of times, Cardozo, is prophesizing that Shabbetai Tsvi is Mashiach. And you get these letters from a Kabbalist in Yerushalayim saying, there's no more Tisha B'Av now. Now Tisha B'Av is a holiday.
All of that be true with also the caveat of, in Eastern Europe, in the Ottoman Empire, there was a tremendous amount of persecution of the Jews.
Correct.
And the people who were being persecuted the most were very susceptible to the acceptance of the concept of a Mashiach, because once you have the acceptance of the concept of a Mashiach, and the Mashiach is here, it means that their suffering would be gone, which is why Eastern Europe, Ottoman Empire, accepted and acted upon much more than the other countries, which had, clearly had anti-Semitism, but not to that level.
Correct. Agreed all around. We talked a little bit about Shabbetai Tzvi's wife, Sarah, and I think that's where we concluded that Shabbetai Tzvi felt it was correct for him to marry a woman of ill repute, because then he's following in the footsteps of Nevi'im like Hosea or Yehoshua. Okay, so...
Hosea, yes.
Yehoshua married Rachav, who was...
She did Shuvah.
Ostensibly a Zona. Okay. So let's go back. One of the points that we made early on is that there is circulating a lot of Kabbalistic material that can be used and was used by Nathan of Gaza in a contorted way to support the movement. That's all well and good if you're a Kabbalist or if you've heard vaguely of these Kabbalistic ideas, but the average Jew who has not needs to rationalize this, needs to understand where is this based in the Torah that they are aware of, the Gemara that they've heard of, not based on some mystical material that they might not have ever heard of or understand.
But again, just speaking of the times, 13th, 14th, 15th century, this was the time of the movement where this was being accepted, not only amongst the Jews, because Christians had it also. It was a concept of Kabbalism, Kabbalah in Judaism and
in Christianity, and the Sufis had the dervishes.
Exactly.
Sure. Can I show you the picture of the Jewish dervishes?
No.
Oh.
Okay, we'll take a look. No,
but that's why people were ready to accept it, because it wasn't a Jewish thing per se. It was a communal thing that was
that's
going
interesting.
on.
In other words, mysticism is part and parcel of the community.
Mysticism was part and parcel of the times.
Okay,
which is why beforehand it never existed.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, that was one of the things we touched on last time, was that you don't have mystical messiahs in the 800s, the 900s.
Correct. Because it didn't exist.
Correct. But there is what we'll call mainstream material that Nathan of Gaza and others who are trying to justify the movement will use and kind of contort to their own purposes. You have Kabbalistic ideas like Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah. So a person needs to go down, meaning to descend spiritually in order to rise even more. And we're going to see where that idea kind of plays out in more mainstream sources from Chazal. But again, this is all done in a kind of aping the way the Torah is supposed to be presented, the way Chazal intended these ideas. So one major concept that they utilize is a Gemara in Nazir. Gedola avera lishma mi mitzvah shelo lishma. Greater is a sin that is done for the sake of heaven than a mitzvah that is done not for the sake of heaven. So what is that Gemara talking about? So we actually, I think, referenced this when we were doing the Rus Shir. That Gemara is really only applied to 3 women. To Rus when she went down to the granary to be with Boaz, the daughters of Lot, when they seduced their father, actually 4 times, Yehuda and Tamar, and Yael and Sisera. So the Gemara there is really not talking about any time you want to do an Avera, just do it for the sake of heaven, and then it's greater than the average mitzvah that you do. But that's how it was contorted, and it was really used to open the floodgates in terms of illicit sexual behavior. So when you remove all of those safeguards, you can say, well, I can go do whatever I want as long as I'm doing it lishma, and that immediately opens the door for specific licentiousness. The Gemara actually foresaw this and said as follows in Sanhedrin: Amar Yehuda Amar Rav Yodon Hayu Yisrael Ba'avodas Kochavim She'ein Bo Mamash. The Jews knew that there is no substance to idolatry. V'lo avdu avodas kochavim ela lahate lehem arayis b'far hesed. So why do they worship avodah zarah? In order to permit illicit sexual behavior b'far hesed in public. So that is exactly what the Sabbateans did, and they kind of took this to a level that was obviously never intended by the Gemara. We also saw the Gemara in Nida that said mitzvos betelos la'asid lavo, that the mitzvos are going to be annulled in the future time. Well, if you're claiming to be Moshiach, then you have ushered in the future time, and now the mitzvos are batel, so you can, again, go do whatever you want to do, because you're living in uncharted times. Another statement from Chazal that they take is the makom shabali tshuva omdim ein tzadikim gemurim yacholin lamud, the place where the Baal Tshuva stands. The holy righteous can never achieve that level. So, to a Sabbatean, what that means is the more I can sin, the more opportunity I have to then repent for that sin and reach a higher level. So, let me find the worst possible. So obviously,
but the
this
Gemara
is
says that somebody who sins and saying I'll repent later is not given the opportunity to repent.
Yeah, correct. But from the Sabbatean perspective, that's irrelevant. The idea is the problem that I'm trying to solve is elevating the spark.
Right.
The problem as a Sabbatean that I'm trying to solve is elevating these sparks that are hidden in the husks of evilness. So I have to perform the most evil act I can imagine in order to repent for it, and then I'll achieve this elevated spiritual level. We talked about there's a Medrash in Vayikra Rabbah that says Amar Rabbi Avin Bar Kahana Amar Hakadosh Baruch Hu. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, this is a pasuk in Yeshaya, Torah Chadasha Me'itai Teitze, that there's going to be a new Torah that comes. Chiddush Torah Me'itai Teitze, or it's a Chiddush to the Torah that is going to come from God. And again, this idea allows the Sabbateans to do things like what Shabbetai Tsvi did. He created a new bracha. The bracha that we have in Birchas HaShachar is Matir Asurim, that God frees those who are bound up, who are locked away, right? Shabbetai Tsvi changes that to Matir Isurim, that God permits the things that had previously been forbidden. Fine. So all of this leads him to the final stage, which is where he, as we said, dons the turban. He becomes the doorman for the Sultan and gets a new name. Shabbetai Tzvi's new Muslim name was Hagiz Mahmed Effendi.
Said real well.
That was the best I could do. We also have an idea that's found in some Taimani midrashim of Moshiach as the yeast in the dough. He's the
leavening agent.
The leavening agent, thank you, that causes the dough to rise. But part of what he has to do is destroy and break apart in order to do that. I'll read, I guess, one more medrash because it's interesting.
I like midrash.
Okay, so this is like pretty mainstream as you can get. Medrash Tehillim. This is the Buber edition. We're in Mizmor Kuf Mem Vav 146, section Daled. Osa Mishpat Lasukim Lechem L'Re'evim. Mihem HaRe'evim. Who are those who are hungry? Zeliyahu Shahaya Re'ev V'haya Ma'achilo Shnemar V'orvim Evian Lo Lechem Ubasar V'avoker Lechem Ubasar Be'erev Min HaNachal Yishteh. Okay. What's that? I'm in trouble. So the measure continues. Hashem matir asurim. Mahu matir asurim. What does it mean that God releases the bound? Yesh omrim kol habehema shenitmeis ba'olam hazeh mitaheros o HaKadosh Baruch Hu lasid lavo. So this is again getting back to the Sabbatean theology that every animal that is forbidden in this world, Hashem will permit it lasid lavo in the time to come. Okay, Kenakasuv Omer Mashahu Shiyah Mashanasu Shiyase Umashanasa Tahorim Hayu Mikodem Lubnei Noch. So what does it mean that what was is what will be? So the animals that were Tahor before Bnei Noach showed up, they are the ones who will eventually be Tahor Lasid Lava. We have this idea in a few places that the reason for a pig, right? Why is a pig called a Chazir? Because it's going to be Choser. It'll eventually become permitted again. Okay. Vilama asaroso. So why did God forbid it? Liros misha makabel dvarav, to see who's going to keep his Torah mishenu makabel ulasid lavo humatiras kol masha asar. And in the future, God will permit all that had been forbidden. V'yesh omrim ena matirin lasid lavo. Okay, and they bring a pasuk for this other opinion. Okay, Umahi. So this is really the one I want. Umahu matir asurim. What does it mean that he permits what has been? I'm sorry, who releases the bound? It means ein iser gadol min hanida. So here the Medrash is reading it like the Sabbateans are trying to read the pasuk that it's matir isurim. Ein iser gadol min hanida. There's no iser greater than a man being with a woman while she's a nida. Shahaisha ro adam ba'asar HaKadosh Baruch Hu labala. That when a woman sees dam, so she's forbidden by God to her husband. Ulasid lavohu matira. And in the future, God will permit her v'gam es hanavim v'es ruach hatuma avir min haaretz. And that's the pasuk from Zechariah that God's going to remove all the tumah from the land. Ve'in tuma elanida shnemar. Fine, etc. And it goes on to prove it. What's that? Is that what the bracha is? No, so the bracha is not about that. But even in the Medrash, in what you have here is a mainstream Medrash Tehillim. They can use that as a source to say, well, if we're in the eschaton, we're in the end of times, so I'm relying on this Medrash. Obviously, we don't operate that way, right? We don't take one far-fetched Medrash and turn that into a halachic guide, but that's exactly what they did. Then, obviously, we get to the death of Shabbetai Tsvi, and we've talked about this before. Can Moshiach come back from the dead? And we mentioned a few Gemaras.
I think we skipped this whole step.
Yeah.
When he converts.
Oh, so we talked about him converting and how the justification there was sorry.
The destruction.
Well, so the Jewish people. Right. So there were three. Okay. So we're going to get to the aftermath in a minute, but essentially what happened is he converts and the movement breaks into three parts. You have either the people who say Mashiach converted, if it's good enough for Mashiach, it's good enough for me, and they convert. You have the people who say convert to Islam. You have the people on the other end of the spectrum who say my Mashiach ain't no Muslim, and they decide forget it, I'm out, and they go back to embrace mainstream Yiddishkeit. And then you have the crypto Sabbateans, who we're going to talk about in a minute. The people who say, well, the reason Shabbetai Tsvi had to do this is because of the mystical journey that he's on, and there are sparks of holiness that are embedded in the Islamic religion and in the Sultan's home, and so Shabbetai Tsvi can go down into the depths of the other side. We are going to outwardly pretend that we're going back to being regular mainstream Jews, but secretly, between you and me and the other crypto Sabbateans, we still hold on to Shabbetai Tsvi and know that he really still is Mashiach, even though he is a Muslim.
Only because of the lack of clarity.
Lack of clarity.
I mean, you have to hedge both sides. We don't really don't know what to do.
Right.
It wasn't like
they'll have their cake and eat it too. If he is, so we were on his side the whole time. If he's not.
But are they to be faulted?
Are they to be faulted? They are certainly to be faulted.
Why?
Because there is, as we've seen, neither from the Rambam's perspective nor from the Gaon's perspective does Moshiach get to just not be Jewish, right? Like there is no source in like mainstream Judaism that says, well, Moshiach, yes, they're trying to take Kabbalah and justify it in this kind of weird way, but as mainstream halacha abiding Jews, if you see somebody go to that length,
singing Yehi to Shabbetai Tsvi,
right.
That's a big
problem. The wrong person to talk about.
That's a deal breaker.
Why? Because he converted?
Yes,
but that was like also pain of death. But
he's a bad person to talk about.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, the Rambam thankfully lived before Shabbetai Tsvi, so we don't know what he would have.
But yeah.
And
the Garatiman.
Yeah, so it is true, and it's a very interesting point that does the Rambam hold that Islam is Yareg Val Yavor? It seems not, right? It seems from the Rambam that if a person is given the option of choose Islam or choose death, that you can choose Islam and fake it till you make it.
Which is what he writes.
Yes. What's that? Versus, let's say, Christianity, although there are today probably some poskim who might tell you that even Christianity, in its current formulation, would not necessarily be Yareg Val Yavor, but certainly, but in the times of the Rambam, it was paganism. Paganism, maybe Eastern religions, Zoroastrianism, any dualist kind of. Okay. So what I'd like to do.
Now you say it broke into thirds. My understanding, can correct me if I'm wrong, is it wasn't. There were three groups.
Yeah.
But they weren't equal in number.
No. The majority of Jews went back to Judaism.
Right, that was my understanding.
The smallest minority followed Shabbetai Tsvi into Islam, and then there was this group, undefined how large or not, although there were definitely like whole towns that were crypto-Sabbateans, and we're going to talk about them right now. I want to point out two other things. Okay, so Shabbetai Tsvi dies, and then we're going to get the people who kind of had it of old age, like 50, he was 52, something like that. Natural causes. Lived out his life to the best that we know. No poisoning. No, he was the Rishon LeZion, the like head of German Jewry, basically. They didn't declare officially, but there was like an unwritten amnesty for anybody who was part of the Sabbatean movement. Don't ask, don't tell, just come back to shul and like let's just close our eyes and pretend this whole thing never happened. Less than 25 years after this whole debacle is when you get the Chassidic movement.
It's reaction to.
So there's I would say a standing question as to how much or how little influence the movement of Shabbetai Tsvi played in the germination of the Chassidic movement. It seems like there was some Sabbatean material that was available to and possibly studied by the Baal Shem Tov. There's a book called the Sefer HaTzoreif.
But I think everybody's in agreement that as a result of Shabbetai Tsvi converting to Islam, the majority of Jews were extremely downtrodden.
Yes.
And extremely broken.
Yes.
Okay, and that set the stage for the Baal Shem Tov to come along and say you don't have to be.
Right. There's hope. There's hope. Something you can enjoy about Judaism.
You can follow this. And be happy.
Yes.
And that's the.
It definitely struck. It hit the right chord in the Jewish psyche.
It hit the right chord in this Jewish psyche as a result of what they were going through.
I think that's absolutely fair.
Yeah. That's what the literature seems to do.
Yeah. So in terms of takeaways, just as a general concept, there is a Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Mekubalim today. His name is Rav Yaakov Moshe Hillel. He not the last Siyam HaShas, but the one before. He was the one that did the started. No, he did brachos. He started the next cycle. He has a very good general klal for understanding whether someone who claims to be a Kabbalist, a miracle worker, a whatever, how do you know if they're a charlatan or not? His general rule is, can this person give you an Ian Shear? Like, can he touch up a Rebaruch Bear? Can he give you like a real hard Gemara shear? If he can't do that, don't even like. After that fact, then you can start declaring whether this is like a real guy or not. But if he can't teach you Gemara Be'in, then don't even consider anything he has to say, and that's going to come into play in a minute when we talk about Jacob Frank. If not that, it doesn't matter how many miracles he performs. You can have like Rav Yaakov Wazana, who we should probably talk about at a different time. Doesn't matter what kind of parlor tricks he can put on. We're going to get a really interesting one from
a magician or something.
Yeah, Rav Yaakov Wazana did some, like, whatever stories you might have heard about the Baba Sally. This is like 10 times more than that. Okay, bottom line for us. There's safety in Rambam, right? Shabbetai Tzvi did not accomplish anything even remotely close to Rambam's criteria for Moshiach. And I think that's important to understand that people got hoodwinked because of Kabbalah, because of the mass hysteria, because of all the things that are going on. All that did was lead to shame, apostasy, and much more. So let's talk about the aftermath of a failed Messiah. Okay. So first of all, there are some interesting commonalities between Shabbetai Tzvi's movement and the beginning of Christianity. Certainly, the idea of antinomianism. So nomos is the Latin for law. Antinomian is to intentionally subvert the law, and that was part and parcel of at least Paul's gospel, and certainly part of the philosophy of Sabbateanism.
I'm confused in that. Where are you going with that? Are you saying Jesus or are you saying Paul?
I'm saying I would say Paul.
Yeah. What?
Christianity. Let's keep it simple.
It isn't simple. There are many...
I would say Paul's Christianity more than Jesus.
I don't know. I think if somebody says I hold by Jesus, but I don't hold by Christianity.
No, because if you equate, I don't think it's a fair equation to equate Jesus with
Christianity,
with Shabbetai Tzvi.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to equate Paul's how Paul led the movement after the fact. As a movement away
but Paul led the movement
away from strictures of law.
Away from strictures of correct. But he did it in the name of religion. But Shabbetai Tzvi was doing it in his own name. There's a difference.
Okay, that's fair. I think I'm trying to compare the movements generally. The philosophy of Paul and on was that you don't need the law, and the philosophy of Shabbetai Tzvi was you actively should subvert the law.
Right, but the difference is that Paul was saying you don't need the law because Jesus came.
Right, and fulfilled the law.
And fulfilled the law.
They're both saying the same thing.
No, but
Shabbetai Tzvi saying, "Oh, Mashiach's here." Okay,
right. I'm Mashiach.
Matir Asurim, or Hatir Asurim. What is it?
Matir Isurim.
Matir Usurim. Okay, he's saying the same thing as the Gospel said. Same thing.
No.
You don't have to keep the Torah anymore, guys. That's what they're both saying.
Yeah, but they're basing it on different things.
Okay, it's semantics. Oh, it's me. Oh, it's the other guy who I'm representing. I don't know. I gotta disagree with you there.
The other thing that's interesting to point out, and we'll get to this more when we get to 20th century Mashiach claimants. This is a study by Leon Festinger, who's a psychologist. He studies several groups that had messianic leaders or prophecies, and what happens after the
Hail Bop and David Koresh.
Yeah, something like that. What's the psychology of people post the failure of their Messiah?
Post-fervor.
Yeah, post-fervor. And what you get are really sort of the breakdown that we've seen, which is some people double down and it's still going to happen, and other people are disillusioned and need some.
That Leiv Tahor movement.
No. This was done in the 70s. This was done actually not in the 70s, maybe the 90s.
Oh.
Okay, so Sabbateanism is a fantastic book by Rabbi Noor that I highly recommend. There's also under the Green Book, under the Ramchal, there's a travel log where he actually goes to the Don Met, the people who are today still crypto Sabbateans or still followers of Shabbetai Tzvi. He travels to Turkey and meets with them, and this is a log of his experiences, which is really, really fascinating. They're still around, at least until the 20th century. Okay. The next generation we get is Jacob Frank, who Rabbi Noor calls the 18th century Hissarak.
Hissarak?
It's like the founder of heresy.
Oh.
Or Hesser.
That's a pretty fun word.
Okay.
Rabbi Noor, I never heard the word antinomian until I met Rabbi Noor.
Yeah.
Okay, you need a dictionary.
This is true, to have a conversation, right?
To have a conversation or to read his Sfarim. He's
so
pretty deep.
Jacob Frank is, as weird as you might think Shabbetai Tsvi is, Jacob Frank is like just on steroids. So he claims to be perhaps a Gilgal of Shabbetai Tsvi. He also at one point claimed to be a deity on his own. He was part of the Trinity. This is 1726 to 1750 something. He marries into this crypto-Sabbatean family, and his whole philosophy is like Gashmias Lishma. Like Gashmias is greater than spirituality. It's more antinomian than Shabbetai Tsvi. I'm not going to get into some of the what's that?
So what do you mean by Gashmias Lishma?
So like you're not sinning in order to elevate the sparks. You're sinning because sin is holy, in and of itself. There's all kinds of stories that are really not even appropriate to share in polite company.
This isn't polite company.
Well, you never know.
Speak for yourself.
I was.
In terms of like orgiastic events that are really wild and out there, even if a fraction.
That's elevating the human being.
That is the way to serve God. To break down that, essentially to destroy religion. That religion is moving people away from God. So the most holy thing you can do, the most holy thing you can do is undermine religion and seep into the Gashmias and do Gashmias Lishma.
And why not just be agnostic?
Carl Berg.
So first of all, agnosticism wasn't super popular back in the day. You could be Catholic, you could be Jewish, but you can't be this weird. And he actually gets persecuted for that. They're like, look, pick a side. We don't know what you're doing. What you're doing is super weird. Be a Jew, we'll persecute you like a Jew, like a nice, good Jew. Don't be this weird in between.
God created us for pleasure.
Something like that. He converts more than once. Converts to Islam in his youth. He eventually converts to Christianity and is holds the title, maybe the Guinness Book of World Records, for largest Jewish conversion en masse to Christianity was through his movement. He becomes a baron and leads a debate. Once he's converted to Christianity, he leads a debate against the Jews, which leads to the burning of the Gemara. He did not believe in any of Torah Sheba'al Peh. He believed only in mystical teachings and the Kabbalah. He tried to separate the two. He predated Madonna by a few hundred years. He was eventually...
Burned at the stake?
No, that would be nice. That would be nice. He was in prison and he held court in this like white collar tower. I think he called it Migdal Oz, where there's this painting of some baroness, and he turned the painting into its own deity. So not like people came and worshipped the painting, not because it was a representation of the lady, but because they thought the painting was a deity. So like really weird stuff. It's even unclear whether or not this guy was literate, like let alone a Talmud Chacham.
What's his name again?
Jacob Frank. His daughter actually takes over the movement after his death. That's Eve or Eva, and then it basically falls apart. Weird sort of interesting tidbit. The first Jewish Supreme Court justice was, any takers?
Brandeis?
Louis Brandeis, very good. He came from a historically devout Frankist family.
Frankist family?
Frankist family, yeah.
Meaning,
like his parents and like
they were Jewish.
Were Jewish Frankists. They believed in
like Jewish.
Yeah.
So was he even halakhically Jewish?
I don't know. That's all I can tell you. There's a whole rabbit hole if you want to really go down it. I kind of pulled myself out after a couple hours because it gets really weird.
Have you been on the Brandeis campus?
What?
Have you been on the Brandeis campus?
No, never.
You'll understand the Frankenstein.
No, there are academics who are trying to trace Louis Brandeis's legal theory to Jacob Frank's philosophy. Yeah, really weird stuff. Okay, the next thing that happens is you get a lot of heresy hunting. So you have the two most prominent that I'm aware of are Moshe Hagiz and Rav Yaakov Emden. These are two big Talmidei Chachamim who are trying to find all these crypto Sabbateans, especially because there are like rabbis and leaders of communities who they believe are crypto Sabbateans, and root them out and hopefully have them removed from polite society.
Throw out that.
We're gonna get to the big names who they went after, some of which you might be able to tell from what's on the table. Their hope was, well, I'll talk about XYZ person and I'll show how his writings have Sabbatean, hints. So the actual crypto Sabbatians love to drop hints to Shabbetai Tsvi in the stuff that they did. They used gematrias or apash, or they used code words like netzach or whatever it was. That, if I'm a crypto Sabbatean, you're a crypto Sabbatean, we know that what I'm talking about is actually Shabbetai Tsvi, but to the masses, it just sounds like nice Divrei Torah.
But they're trying to root out the leadership.
They're trying to root out the leadership. Yeah, absolutely.
They're not going after every single person.
No. If you're singing, hymns from Chemdas Hayamim at your Shabbos table, they don't care. They want to get the dealers, not the people on the street.
Not the users.
Not the users, right? So what they ran into, though, was a whole bunch of apathy, because people wanted to forget about what happened. The last thing they wanted was, oh, there's another problem. They wanted to just let's pretend this is all over. I don't want to hear about the fact that my rabbi in shul is actually also Sabbatean. That doesn't really bode well for me.
It needs to get burned.
Right. So the two biggies that they went after, the first was basically one of, if not the Gadol Hador at the time, was Yonatan Eibshitz. His farm are still widely in use today. Yaros Dvash, you can find in many upstanding shuls and yeshivot. He was hunted by Rav Yaakov Emden, who took a look especially at the amulets that he produced. So people back in the day, if you're scared or you need a medical cure or whatever, you go to have someone, especially a Gadol Hador, write you an amulet. And usually those amulets are written on a tiny piece of parchment. They're rolled up and they're worn. Very popular. Rav Yaakov Emden, so first of all, it's important to know, Rav Yaakov Emden was his own printing press. He had a printing press in his house, so he didn't have to, send a letter to the editor. He would just decide something, write it up, and then print out pamphlets for everybody. So he was able to really get his material out there. He cracked open these amulets, made copies of them, and showed how the stuff that's in there is actually references to Shabbetai Tsvi and not God, or Shabbetai Tsvi is God, or whatever. And he thought, aha, see that? I just proved that this guy's a Sabbatean, let's all drive him out of town. The exact opposite happened. Rav Yaakov Emden was persecuted and driven out of town instead.
Like, why are you causing trouble?
Yeah, like, we don't want to know. And blah, blah, blah. You even have this one I really enjoyed.
What was the deal with the amulets?
So one of the other Gedolei Hador steps into the middle of this fray. That is the Noda B'Yehuda, Yechezkel Landau. And he says,
Also mainstream.
Super mainstream. He says, to make peace, it must be that someone tampered with the amulets after Rav Yonatan and Eibshitz made them. Someone clearly tampered with them, and that what Yaakov Emden is finding is not what was actually there originally, but is some sort of forgery or after the fact kind of problem. And that way we can make peace. It doesn't end up working, but Rav Yaakov Emden gets the raw end of the deal. Now we get to me, probably the most interesting name on the list. You and I and everyone else have probably learned Mesilas Yesharim. Mesilas Yesharim is written by Moshe Chaim Luzzato, known as Ramchal. So you may not be aware that Ramchal wrote well over 100 other works, including works on logic and grammar. He wrote a number of plays. I'm not the first one to say this. I've had other Rebbeim tell me that they agree with the fact that these plays are awful, and I think it's okay to say that the Ramchal wrote some awful plays, but he did.
Off Broadway, right?
What's that? off Broadway. And they're still available. You can get the one on Shimshon online.
Can you?
Yeah, for sure. You can. I'm trying to find some place who will put them on. Like, actually, I think that would be cool.
Go to the Antrim Playhouse and be like, dude, we've got these plays. Now hear us out.
directed and written by Ramchal.
Yeah.
So he wrote well over 100 works, including what he called the Zohar 2.0. He calls it Zohar Tinyana, like the Zohar Part 2, which he wrote in Aramaic. He, like we mentioned last time, there was this phenomenon of Magidim, of spiritual teachers who help produce these materials. The Ramchal had his own Magid, and he was persecuted because people weren't sure what to do with all the Kabbalistic weirdness that was coming out of this, like, super genius, absolutely phenomenal genius who was producing all this material.
He was in Italy?
He's in Italy, and then he eventually gets forced out of Italy and has to go to Amsterdam. He dies very young as well. Because he has this Magid, doesn't want to get married, because when you get married, you're going to end up losing the Magid. That was his fear. But eventually he turns his wedding into a very mystically oriented ceremony. And that's what you get in that book from Professor Tishby. He takes the ksuba, and the professor does, and deconstructs the Kabbalistic allusions that Ramchal puts in his commentary on his own ksuba. So Ramchal is marrying a woman named Tzipora. So you have Moshe and Tzipora. There's symbolism that he sees there that eventually gets to the point where it sounds like he's possibly marrying the Shekhinah, or he sees some sort of rectification in the spiritual realm of what he is doing by getting married in the physical realm. So the upshot of all of this is that he's probably not a Sabbatean. Okay, so like that, he's in the clear on that score. What he does do. So I don't know enough to answer that question. What I can tell you is the consensus from the academics. And there really is, the truth is there's no real consensus. There's like a machlokas academics. So Yehuda Liebes, who was a student of Gershom Sholem, he believes that Ramchal was a closeted Sabbatean. Rabbi Arthur Green, is very hesitant to go that far, and he believes that actually what Ramchal was trying to do was be metakein, to fix the damages that were caused by Shabbetai Tsvi. Ramchal has a whole cadre that assembles around him in Padua. These are like from guys who are going to college and learning with, or gymnasium, whatever they called it, and learning with him Kabbalah at the same time. And he right. So he sees in each of these students a component of the Messianic age. So he sees himself as the reincarnation of Moshe Rabbeinu. So sorry, let's back up. We've till now we've talked about two Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. In Ramchal's thought, there's actually several additional components to the Messianic time. One is that Moshe will come back or be reincarnated, and Ramchal sees himself as the reincarnation of Moshe Rabbeinu. Then he sees his student, Rav Moshe David Vali, as David, like the reincarnation of David, or Mashiach ben David. He sees another student, Rav Yekutiel Gordon, as another mystical component of the Messianic time, a leader from Shevet Dan whose name is Saraya, and the missing part to the story is who is Mashiach ben Yosef. So it sounds like the belief was that Shabbetai Tsvi was the Mashiach ben Yosef who died, and their job is to repair his soul. Yeah.
So hold on.
Yeah, there's a lot.
If the Ramchal, Rav Yonatan Eibshitz, and some of these other people were being attacked by, let's say, like Rav Yaakov Emden and whatnot, why didn't they just come out and be like, yeah, I don't believe it, I don't hold the Shabbat.
They do. In fact, what happens is Rav Yonatan Eibshitz has to swear, like on a Sefer Torah, that he doesn't believe in Mashiach, and that doesn't believe in Shabbetai Tsvi, and that Shabbetai Tsvi is a Russia. And then Rav Yaakov Emden takes the text of what Rav Yonatan Eibshitz said, and says, see, they were in there. There's actually allusions that he's really saying the opposite of what he said. So no stone is left unturned where you can proclaim it from high heaven as Ramchal did. Ramchal's like, look, in that work over there, the Green Book, there's Kines Hashem Tzvakos is his basically philosophical argument against Shabbetai Tsvi. It's him saying, here's what Shabbetai Tsvi got wrong, and here's what I believe, and it is totally the anathema to that whole world. But in it, there are ideas that are based on Shabbetai Tsvi or based on Nathan Gaza's concepts and ideas. So it's very hard to tease out what is real, what is just pure heresy hunting. So there was a lot that Rav Yaakov Emden got wrong. Rav Yaakov Emden looked at the gravestone of Rav Yonatan Eibshitz's wife and finds allusions in the gravestone based on certain letters being large or small or whatever it is, that that he also believed that she was a Sabbatean, but it's completely not true. He actually had problems with the text, whatever it is. I'm not we're gonna get too far down a field, but not every person that, it's like McCarthyism. Not everyone was a communist just because someone screamed from high heaven that they were a communist. So there are a lot of false positives. There were a lot of people who were Sabbatean and had to proclaim in public that they weren't, but then continued on their, on their heretical ways. So it's very hard to know, and this is part of the reason that the Vilna Gaon put the Chassidim in Cherem, right? Like you said, the Chassidim show up, and there is a lot of mysticism that undergirds Chassidic Torah, and between Shabbetai Tsvi, Jacob Frank, and all the other weirdness that's going on, one thing comes out for sure, which is Kabbalah is dangerous. This is where you start getting the idea of you got to be 40 years old, you got to be married, whatever it is. You don't crack open the Zohar until you know what you're talking about, because we've suffered enough from what's going on. And then the Hasidim show up and they're like, let's learn, watered down Kabbalistic ideas, right? And the Vilna Gaon, who himself was a major Kabbalist, probably wrote more on Kabbalah than he wrote on Nigla. He's like, no, thank you. This is smacks too much of Shabbetai Tsvi in that whole world, and puts them all in Cherem. The grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and I guess we'll end with this, was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and we get some really dicey ideas from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. I'll read you one brief thing from Likutei Moharan Tinyana 8.3, part 2, 8.3. What's that?
That's what we'll agree with.
Yes. When there is a blemish, that a person has this desire for licentiousness, chas v'shalom, she'az hatfila b'mechinas hadin, that it forces prayer to be in the world of judgment. V'hasitra achra bolasosa, and the other side, the negative side, swallows up this prayer, chas v'shalom. Az shrichim bal koach gadol, then you need someone who has a lot of abilities, shispal tefillah b'mechinas din, that they have to daven a special kind of davening, a davening that is in the category of din, kamo ba'ei shahaya ma'isa Zimri, like what happened when Cosby and Zimri were together. Shehutzrach Pinchas lispalo tefillah b'mechinas din, that Pinchas in the retelling of the story of Pinchas in Tehillim, it says vayamod Pinchas v'ispalel, that Pinchas stood and davened. So Rabbi Nachman is referring to this, but it sounds like the idea is that there is this this person who has a desire for licentiousness and is swallowed up by the forces of evil. That's Shabbetai Tsvi, and it needs Rabbi Nachman, who is the person who's able to daven the special tefillah to redeem that spirit of Shabbetai Tzvi. The pasuk in Eicha says, Ruach Apenu Mashiach Hashem nilkad b'shchisosam asher amarnu b'tzilo nichya b'goyim. The breath of our life, the Lord's anointed, was captured in their traps. He in whose shade we had thought to live among the nations. I think that's the source for a lot of what Rabbi Nachman is talking about, and we'll kind of leave it at that. The only other point I will say is that one of Rabbi Nachman's stories, which are very famous, seems like it was pretty clearly taken directly from Jacob Frank. And that, from there, we will go to Moshiach in our modern time next time. Thank you.
Wow, you made it all the way through to the end of this year. Thank you. These series are a passion of mine, and a lot of effort goes into them. I'd be grateful for your help in spreading the awareness to others. If you're interested in joining us live, getting the notes, or asking a question, please message me on Twitter at Isaacson, ISAACSON. Thanks.